Oh man, everyone is so miserable. You got to smile, or we're never going to make it, you know. Oh, the cabin fever has just inundated everybody. Everybody's got a bad attitude. We got to smile. God loves you. So does somebody does. Woo! We got to talk a little bit of snow here in our rundown tonight, and then we're going to meet with Steve Ahlquist. Well, that was kind of Freudian. Steve is an atheist, so he would probably quarrel with the idea that God loves you because there is no God. I didn't bring him on to talk about that, but he's one of the lead atheist spokespeople types in the region. He's also somebody who's arguing vociferously that the kind of protests that we've seen across major interstate highways should not be the subject of felony charges, and it's a reaction to State Senator Lou Raptakis's proposed legislation that calls for that. So he is our guest tonight, and we'll talk with him coming up momentarily. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you aboard. I know you've got Major League cabin fever. I hope I can help it a little bit with, I don't know, some discussion of snow. Hey, when we come back, this gentleman says it'd be a crime to charge these people with a crime. Stay with us.
Your protest is a premeditated act, and you're blocking an important artery of the state that you can jeopardize someone's life, plain and simple. And that's why you have to treat it not like a misdemeanor, a felony. And look, we have many laws in the books, felonies, assault and battery, second-time shoplifting is a felony, writing a bad check intentionally is a felony, drunk driving, third offense is a felony, but if there's bodily injury, death resulting, it's a felony.
How about some more crime trivia there? There's a long excerpt from Lou Raptakis, but he makes the point about how he feels how grave this act is, and you know, I'm kind of with him. Headline here, they ain't with him. A felony for blocking roads un-American, according to the author, Steve Ahlquist, who joins me. Steve, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
You are a writer. You write for RA Future, which is a very compelling blog, I think. Sometimes I actually agree with the stuff that you guys write. Every once in a while.
Sure.
Lay it on me. What's the problem?
Well, I don't think it should be a felony. It's really that simple.
Sure, thanks for coming. And
right,
that'll wrap up the show.
Cool. Well, I don't think it should be a felony because it's already a crime. There's already a series of crimes that I mean, it's disorderly conduct. 5 people were charged in Rhode Island. 2 people have already been settled in court. 1 settled, she got a filing and 50 hours of community service. The other is serving 6 months probation, 100 hours of community service, and a $500 fine. Making a felony seems to be unnecessary.
Well, I don't know whether this is going to preclude the next stunt like this. If you're suggesting that that penalty suffices, clearly the people who are deciding to come across highways knew that it was not legal.
Right.
So it did not preclude them from acting out anyway. So whatever list of penalty you've provided us was not a deterrent, right?
Right, but then again, civil disobedience isn't about deterrence. Is it about coming up with a punishment that'll prevent any civil disobedience? I mean, civil disobedience has a long history in our country, and we wouldn't want to be putting Martin Luther King in jail for a year on some kind of enhanced charges that we put whenever he did something that we didn't like.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is suggesting that civil disobedience is in and of itself un-American, or well, I don't want to use the American term in the wrong context. Look, I mean, even Martin Luther King Jr., the references, you have a reference to Selma in this particular article, right?
Because the movie just came out.
Right, but in Selma they marched. They were moving. There was a lane available if an ambulance had to come through.
That's true.
This strapping yourself to the highway.
Well, that's not what happened in Rhode Island. That's what happened in Boston.
Well, there was just a one-up in Boston.
Yeah, but well, true. But I'm just pointing out there was a difference between what happened in Rhode Rhode Island and what we're doing here and what happened in Boston. Here's the difference.
In terms of what? The premeditation, the strategies, and the tactics used?
Yeah, I would say that nobody strapped themselves to barrels in Providence or did any of that yet. Or, I mean, I say yet because I'm not saying I have any idea what they'll do next, but I'm just saying that didn't happen here.
Let me ask you this, just so we can clear the deck. I'm sure people are wondering. Is this the kind of thing that you could see yourself doing? No,
I didn't. In fact, I was there that night, and I was filming for Rhode Island Future, and I didn't go on the highway for a variety of reasons, but mostly because, you know, there was a lot of equipment with me, and there's a big fence to jump over, and I'm not, you know, going to be doing that. But
well, you didn't do it because you had too many things you were carrying, or because you had a philosophical problem, thought it was irresponsible?
Well, I wouldn't do it myself. If it were me and it was my protest, I wouldn't be jumping on the highway. I don't think that.
Because?
Because I think the messaging is off. But I think that's a different idea. I wouldn't want to criticize these people on their tactics, because that's their call. I think their call has to be, they have to decide what they want to do for their cause. I don't know that it was the best message to send, but I wouldn't say that what they did was necessarily something that deserves a felony conviction.
You know, I'm going to agree with you on that point. In fact, Lou Raptakis and I, where are we, Kev? I'm going to kind of flip to the next segment, and I'll do that from that camera or that camera. There we go. When we come back, Lou Raptakis actually tried to make that point. I said, that's not your job, Lou. However, the essence of misdemeanor to felony, I'm still supporting that concept. We'll talk about it a little more, Steve, when we come back to it.
Okay.
You can protest. There's hundreds of venues to protest. You can protest in front of the state capitol. You can protest anywhere. But why are you doing it in an area where you are jeopardizing the public? You're jeopardizing someone else. You know, the problem, Dan, here is also when they do these type of things, protesting on I-93, I-95, they're losing their purpose, their focus. They're focusing on an issue, and they're angering the public, and plus putting the public in jeopardy.
Yeah, so Lou started to argue tactics when he was here last time. That was about a couple of weeks ago when State Senator Raptakis was here, talking about taking these highway protests to a felony charge. Steve made a point here prior, and I agree with you, that we shouldn't be legislating strategy.
Right.
So if the message was lost, and I think it completely was for both the folks at 93 and on 95 in Providence first, and 93 in Boston, where people were so apoplectic about the byproduct of the protest that they forgot it was about Ferguson and, you know, Black Lives Matter and all the...
Right.
It's not his job to penalize you for calling out or executing a poor strategy.
Yeah, I think that's part of what
I agree with
the
you.
legislation does, exactly.
So let's forget about that part.
Okay.
Putting the public in danger at a level when you've got highways close to medical facilities and the like seems to me to be way past civil disobedience boundaries. And the misdemeanors that we have hardly deter, and criminal statutes are in part about deterrence, hardly deter folks from thinking long and hard about having that on their record. I think it's grave enough.
Well, Andy Horowitz, who's a professor of law at Roger Williams, spoke at the hearings for the Hall bill, the Representative Hall bill, which is similar to the Raptakis bill. And he said that the manslaughter charges could still apply if somebody was on the highway being blocked. Then there would be felony manslaughter charges that could be brought up, because if a death resulting from blocking the highway, and if they could show that the highway blockers caused that or delayed the person from getting it, then those charges could be brought. So they're already, again, were covered under the law. He said there would be no problem with bringing those kind of charges. And so again, I don't see the necessity for a felony on this when we already have a reasonable amount of time that even the law that Raptakis has suggested is only saying a year in prison. Right now, we're still looking at a year
on
in
first
prison.
On a first offense.
On a first,
with 60 days minimum mandatory.
Right, which
Judge's
is different.
Discretion between 60 days and a year.
Yeah. And I think 60 days mandatory is also, I mean, for instance, one person got 6 months probation, which could just as easily have been a few days in jail or a couple weeks in jail if she wanted to.
Well, there's a big difference between 60 and a few days or a couple of weeks.
But 6 months probation is not a small. It's not a small thing.
Eh.
It sounds like, but it's also. But these are not. Also, remember, these are not people who. The person who was charged or recently convicted. She's a farmer, right? So she has things she has to do. She has 100 hours of community service to do. Again, that's 2.5 weeks of full-time work to do. These are not small
All right,
charges.
so your worry is what? Somebody that does something this stupid shouldn't have to pay the price for the rest of their lives with a felony charge?
I think that's my worries. Exactly.
Is it the jail time itself, or is it the record?
I think the record is a big, big problem. I mean, part of the reason that they have this Black Lives Matter movement is because we're talking about the over-criminalization of people of color. We're talking about profiling. We're talking about police brutality. And so in response, instead of doing anything to address their concerns, the Senator Ahlquist has introduced a bill to criminalize their behavior.
Well, wait a second. You were involved in filming the protest that took place proximate to the public safety building, right? Which was the night of the 95 thing.
Yeah.
It seemed like that particular protest got ample attention, and the conversation about what the mission was about wasn't lost until the 95 thing happened.
I would say that we're still talking about it, which is something that doesn't happen with many protests. And so even though we're talking,
say or you wouldn't say?
I would say that we're still talking about the Black Lives Matter. Even if we're only talking about it in terms of whether the highway was a proper response or not, we're still talking about it. It's still in the news, and it's still coming up constantly.
Well, we, God forbid, the next mistake that occurs out there in terms of black-white loss of life, law enforcement to the citizens. I mean, we go on all day about the equities in law enforcement, and those conversations I think need to be had. I thought we had some very healthy conversation even on the radio show about what's really at stake here. The Ferguson story and the Staten Island story I didn't see as the same. The grand juries weren't behaving the same. But here's what I have seen: no local conversation of any net worth at all whatsoever in Providence and Boston about this particular systemic societal law enforcement relationship problem since these interstate protests. Strategy mistake, big time, and it seems to me that it is because it was such a grievous offense in terms of public perception that the message has been completely lost.
Could Senator Ahlquist have introduced a bill to address some of those concerns instead of a bill to do this? Because knowing that it's already criminalized.
I'm almost right back into the same trap. Maybe I'll have you and Lou here to kind of talk about it if you'll take up that debate.
Yeah, we can
Love
do
to
that
have you.
sometime.
But here's the thing. Let me ask you a final question. Don't you feel kind of silly arguing for the rights of people to traipse across an interstate highway and block?
I'm not arguing for their right to traipse across. I'm arguing
or a mitigated penalty for them to do
not
such.
even mitigated. I'm saying that the penalties that exist right now are already decent enough. I mean, literally, people could go to jail under the statute we have right now.
But they haven't.
But they haven't because the judge and the legal system sees it in a different context. They don't see it as serious. Nobody was hurt. Had somebody been hurt, additional penalties could have applied. But we didn't have that happen, fortunately. So right now, we have what we have.
All right, we'll take up the debate.
All right, cool.
Again. Good to see you. Thank you for
Thank you very
coming
much.
in. Steve Ahlquist. One more thing and we come back. Stay with us.